Toru Iban, the ever-eager protagonist, belonged to an elite team of warriors led by his childhood friend and celebrated fighter, Sain. From a tender age, the group had forged an unbreakable bond, supporting one another both in battle and in life's trials. It seemed as though nothing could shatter the camaraderie they shared. That is, until the fateful day when the rest of the team gathered around him with grim faces to deliver an announcement that upended his world. They declared, without hesitation, that Toru was being exiled from the group. Sain, ever the picture of false concern, explained that Toru's abilities paled in comparison to the rest of the team. He claimed it would be a tragedy if Toru fell in battle due to his weakness. The words felt like a slap, leaving Toru utterly stunned. He sat frozen, mouth slightly agape, unable to process the betrayal. His eyes instinctively sought comfort from Lisa, his fiancé, but the coldness in her gaze struck him harder than the team's words. She didn't offer the solace he craved. Instead, she nodded her agreement with Sain, as if her loyalty to the team outweighed their personal bond. That was when Toru noticed it, a new ring on her finger, one that wasn't the one he had lovingly slipped on her hand during their engagement. His gaze darted to the other female members of the group and then back to Sain, who wore a smug expression. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. Sain had been sleeping with Lisa. In fact, it was clear he had been involved with all of them. The betrayal burned hotter than any flame. Toru's emotions boiled over as he charged at Sain, landing a furious uppercut square on his jaw. He hurled every ounce of blame at the man who had orchestrated this nightmare. But his rage didn't last long. The others rushed to Sain's defense, subduing Toru and making it clear he was no longer welcome. With no more words exchanged, they cast him out of the party for good. Broken and drenched by the pouring rain, Toru stumbled out of the pub. His hand clutched the engagement ring he had once given Lisa, a painful reminder of what he had lost. Images of her face refused to leave his mind, gnawing at him with relentless cruelty. His knees gave out, and he collapsed onto the muddy ground, letting out a guttural cry that echoed into the storm. As the rain eventually eased, Toru forced himself to rise. The future lay before him, but it felt more like a void than an opportunity. In a futile attempt to distract himself, he pulled up his combat stats and compared them to those of his former comrades. Their overwhelming strength loomed over him like a mocking shadow, while he remained hopelessly stuck at level 20, a stark reminder of his inadequacy. Frustration bubbled over into action. He wandered into the wilderness, seeking an outlet for his anger, and found it in the form of a black demon dog that appeared as if summoned by fate. In a fit of rage, he fought the beast with everything he had, managing to slay it despite the odds. Then, as if the universe had decided to finally acknowledge his efforts, an incredible surge coursed through him. His stats skyrocketed, and in a single instant, he ascended to an awe-inspiring level 300. It soon becomes clear that Toru's mysterious skill had been quietly stockpiling experience points all along. Once he hit the necessary threshold, every one of his abilities reached their maximum potential. This revelation left him stunned yet exhilarated. Considering Sain had only ever managed to scrape his way to level 60, Toru couldn't help but feel a rush of pride. With a contented smile, he tilted his head back, gazing at the sky as though for the first time, finally sensing the tides of fortune turning in his favor. With newfound strength and a growing sense of independence, Toru decided it was time to leave the familiar behind. Wanderlust took hold of him, urging him toward the neighboring country of Armand. Upon crossing the border, his first encounter came in the form of a slave shop, a dingy building that exuded an air of desperation. The betrayal of his friends and the gnawing ache of loneliness weighed heavily on him, sparking a yearning for companionship, someone who, unlike his past comrades, would never betray him. Inside, an oily, sharp-tongued salesman eagerly greeted him, wasting no time in showcasing the store's most expensive offerings. He paraded an array of servants before Toru, including a stoic lizard man and a sleek, battle-ready elf, each with hefty price tags. However, Toru was not interested in luxury or appearances. He wanted something more practical and more affordable. With a knowing smile, the salesman led him to the back, where the less desirable slaves were kept. Here, the atmosphere darkened, with cages lining the walls and their occupants bearing signs of neglect. Among the disheveled group, a small figure caught Toru's attention. She was a frail girl with delicate humanoid features but carried distinctly beast-like traits, including the budding beginnings of a tail. As soon as she saw Toru, her eyes widened and she fell back, screaming, 300! She was able to see Toru's level, which caught Toru's interest. Her price was very low, and Toru wanted to know why. The salesman explained that she was priced so low due to a rare illness that made her a burden to most buyers. Yet this detail didn't deter Toru. Something in her quiet resilience resonated with him, and without hesitation, he purchased her. The girl, whose name he soon learned was Kaede, seemed bewildered by her new circumstances as Toru guided her from the shop. His first stop was a nearby doctor, where he hoped to find a cure for her ailment. The doctor examined Kaede with a mix of curiosity and pity before delivering grim news. Her illness was no ordinary disease. The only cure lay in a potion brewed from the heart of a pure dragon. Kaede's tired eyes met Toru's, brimming with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. In that moment, Toru felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He promised her, with unwavering determination, that he would find a way to save her. Thus began Toru's next great journey. He ventured deep into the mystical woods, where the air grew thick with ancient magic and the shadows whispered of lurking dangers. Yet, as if sensing the power radiating from him, the mythical creatures that inhabited the forest kept their distance. Toru pressed onward, his resolve unshaken, determined to face whatever awaited him to fulfill his promise to Kaede, until he finally caught sight of his target. A black dragon loomed in a clearing ahead, its scales glinting ominously under the dappled light. For most, the sight of such a beast would summon an army, but for Toru, this was a chance to test the limits of his powers. As the dragon reared back to strike, Toru moved with blinding speed, his sword slicing cleanly through its neck in a single stroke. The colossal head fell with a thunderous crash, leaving him victorious with the dragon's heart now in his possession. Returning home, Toru wasted no time preparing the potion. Kaede watched him, her wide eyes betraying a mix of disbelief and wonder. It was as though she couldn't fathom why someone would go to such lengths for her. She drank it down without hesitation, the bitter concoction leaving her shivering before she fell into a deep sleep. The following morning, Toru woke to find Kaede still fast asleep beside him, her breathing steady and peaceful. His own stomach growled, and the thought of dragon meat crossed his mind. Summoning the local chef, Toru made the unusual request to prepare the delicacy. Though puzzled, the chef obliged, and soon Toru was dining on a juicy dragon steak, savoring its unexpectedly rich flavor. Finding the taste irresistible, he ordered a dragon burger for Kaede, figuring she'd appreciate the treat when she woke. His instincts were right. When Kaede awoke and smelled the food, her hunger was unmistakable. The girl devoured the burger in mere moments, her famished state clear as day. Toru couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm, but as he took in the sight of her in her tattered rags, he decided it was time for a change. He led her to the marketplace, determined to outfit her with clothes befitting her new life. After a whirlwind shopping spree, Kaede emerged transformed. Dressed in the latest fashion, a crop top and a trendy mini-skirt, she looked almost unrecognizable. The malnourished girl from the slave cage was gone, replaced by someone brimming with vitality and joy. As they browsed further, Kaede hesitated in front of a weapons stall. Pointing to a pair of large iron fans, she timidly asked if Toru would purchase them for her. Though skeptical at first, Toru doubted her ability to wield such heavy weapons. But Kaede surprised him, effortlessly lifting the fans with her beast-like strength and spinning them with ease. Her determination won him over, and the fans became hers. Their errands complete, the two found a quiet park bench to rest. Sharing snacks under the warm sunlight, Kaede turned to Toru with a soft smile and referred to him as Master. Though the term felt strange to him, there was no denying the bond forming between them. Toru shifted uncomfortably at Kaede's words and gently asked her to call him something other than Master. To his dismay, her face instantly fell, and a flicker of panic crossed her eyes. It was as though she feared he might abandon her just like everyone else in her life had. Before the situation could spiral, Toru leaned forward and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He told her with quiet sincerity that he wanted her to stay by his side for as long as he lived. Kaede's expression transformed in an instant. Her worry melted into sheer joy, and she exclaimed her happiness so enthusiastically that it startled a nearby squirrel. Toru chuckled softly at her reaction, though the moment didn't last long. His eyes shifted to her hair, catching a shimmer in the sunlight that he hadn't noticed before. He opened his mouth to comment, asking if she wanted to cut her bangs. And before anything could have happened, a sudden surge energy crossed through him. Toru's body stiffened as an overwhelming force raced through his veins, making his hands tremble uncontrollably. The power was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as though his very soul had been ignited. Kaede, noticing his shaking form, grew alarmed. She reached out to him, but the sheer intensity of the aura surrounding him made her recoil in fear. Fumbling to understand what was happening, Toru hastily pulled up his stats. What he saw made his jaw drop. The skill limits that had previously bound him were shattered, replaced by a staggering new threshold. His level and abilities had skyrocketed once again, far beyond anything he thought possible. The sheer weight of his power made the air around him thick, and Kaede, unable to withstand the force, toppled off the bench they were sharing. Realizing he had lost control, Toru gritted his teeth and focused, forcing his aura to retreat. The overwhelming energy dimmed, and the oppressive atmosphere dissipated. He stood and hurried to Kaede's side, apologizing profusely as he helped her back to her feet. Though still shaken, Kaede's concern quickly gave way to awe when Toru explained what had just happened. Her eyes sparkled as she gushed about how incredible and strong he was, her admiration boundless. Toru, however, couldn't shake the oddity of it all. Reviewing his stats once more, he noticed something peculiar. Despite the recent boosts, his baseline level had somehow stabilized at 50, far higher than the average cap of 10. Puzzled, he considered the implications but chose to set the mystery aside for now. Kaede had been frightened enough, and he didn't want to burden her with unnecessary worries. Returning his attention to her, he asked gently if there was anything else she needed. Kaede initially shook her head, hesitating to voice her thoughts, but Toru could sense there was something she wasn't saying. With gentle persistence, he coaxed her into sharing her request. After much prodding, she finally admitted that all she wanted was a simple bar of soap. Toru blinked, surprised by the modesty of her wish, but he fulfilled it without hesitation. Once back, it became clear why Kaede had requested the soap. She had likely never had the luxury of a proper bath. Noticing her discomfort with the idea, Toru casually suggested they take one together. Kaede's face flushed bright red at the suggestion, but he reassured her with an amused grin, promising that nothing inappropriate would happen. Still hesitant, she agreed, trusting his intentions. Sitting on a wooden stool draped in a towel, Kaede fidgeted nervously as Toru began washing her hair. The soap lathered thickly in his hands as he ran his fingers through her tangled locks, carefully working out the knots. As he did, his gaze drifted downward, noticing the small, bushy tail starting to grow from her lower back. Curious, he asked her what breed of animal she might be. Kaede shyly explained that she was a fox type, which brought a grin to Toru's face. He chuckled, mentioning that he'd heard foxes were supposed to have golden fur. As the bath progressed, Toru spread the soap across her back and arms, working diligently. But as his hand accidentally brushed against her bare chest, both of them froze. The air grew thick with an awkward tension. Toru immediately stepped back, unsure how to respond, his face heating up in embarrassment. Kaede, however, remained composed, her loyalty evident as she calmly declared she was at her master's disposal, no matter his intentions. Toru stared at her in disbelief, a mix of guilt and frustration welling within him. Flustered, he lightly flicked her forehead and told her with amusement that he might consider it when she was older. The humor in his tone broke the tension, and Kaede's nervous giggle soon followed. Once Kaede was thoroughly cleaned, she decided it was time to honor her master's wishes by tidying herself further. She grabbed a pair of scissors and began cutting her long hair, clumsily chopping away with little regard for precision. Strands of hair fell around her in uneven clumps, and Toru, watching from the side, couldn't help but chuckle at her amateurish approach. Yet, as the transformation took shape, he found himself unexpectedly struck by her features. Toru, with a teasing grin, pointed to the two small protrusions atop Kaede's head, thinking she had missed cutting those sections of her hair. Kaede, however, clarified that they weren't hair at all, they were her animal ears. Toru blinked in surprise, his confusion growing as he remembered she already had a perfectly normal pair of human ears. The realization left him momentarily speechless. He muttered that the god responsible for her creation must have had an odd fixation, deciding that a single pair of ears simply wasn't sufficient. Kaede couldn't help but giggle at his bewilderment, her mood lightened by his playful commentary. As the day gave way to dusk, the pair worked together to clean the house. Although Kaede was technically his slave, Toru treated her more like an equal, refusing to let her handle all the chores alone. He scrubbed floors, straightened furniture, and even helped with the laundry, much to Kaede's delight. Unable to contain her happiness, Kaede later told him how much she had enjoyed the day, expressing her hope that they could make many more unforgettable memories together. The following morning, Toru returned home looking utterly drained and visibly irritated. Kaede, noticing his weariness, quickly approached him, concern evident in her expression. She asked what had happened, and with a heavy sigh, Toru explained that the elderly salesman at the store had been furious with him and had charged him an outrageous fee for repairing his swords. Kaede tilted her head curiously, prompting Toru to elaborate. He admitted that a few days ago, while cleaning one of his swords, he had accidentally damaged it beyond repair. Left with no other choice, he had gone to an armory in search of a replacement. The salesman there had proudly presented him with what he claimed was the sturdiest sword in the shop. But when Toru tested it with a single swipe, the blade shattered instantly, the force of the swing sending shockwaves through the building. Windows exploded in a cascade of glass, and when the dust settled, the racks in the shop were empty, every single weapon embedded in the surrounding walls. The salesman had been left speechless, his jaw hanging open as he surveyed the destruction. Toru, however, hadn't gotten off lightly. The damages had left him with a hefty bill, and the financial strain only added to his vexation. Kaede, seeing his troubled state, quickly offered a solution. She said she knew of the perfect weapon for a warrior of his caliber. Her voice brimmed with confidence as she reassured him, her words igniting a flicker of curiosity in Toru's otherwise tired demeanor. He raised an eyebrow and asked what she meant, intrigued to hear what his ever-resourceful companion had in mind. Toru's astonishment only grew as Kaede led him to the towering Temple of Sacred Arms, an ancient structure said to house legendary weapons forged for the mightiest of heroes. The massive temple loomed before them, its intricate carvings and divine aura radiating power. As they stood at its entrance, Toru couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. The weapons inside were meant for true heroes, and he questioned whether he was worthy of wielding such sacred power. Kaede, however, brimmed with unwavering faith in him, her blind trust serving as the encouragement he needed to push forward. Stepping into the building, Toru's first impression was how impossibly vast the interior seemed. The ceilings stretched higher than his eyes could follow, and the walls bore glowing inscriptions that pulsed faintly with divine energy. He voiced his awe aloud, to which Kaede replied with a proud smile, explaining that the temple was rumored to have been built by the gods themselves. Her tone grew more serious as she detailed the trials he would need to overcome. The first challenge was to open the locked temple door, an entrance to the inner sanctum, while the second was to pull the sacred sword from its pedestal. It sounded deceptively simple, but Toru's confidence wavered when he caught sight of the so-called door. The door was enormous, easily the size of a castle gate, and crafted from what appeared to be solid obsidian, with no visible handles or mechanisms. It looked as though only a colossal giant could hope to push it open. Despite its intricate carvings and divine glow, the sheer weight of the thing made Toru grimace. Kaede, however, was unshaken. She urged him to try, confident that his upgraded abilities would make the impossible possible. Taking a deep breath, Toru approached the massive door. Placing his palm against its cold, unyielding surface, he concentrated. To his shock, and Kaede's delight, the door responded immediately, creaking open with an almost sentient ease as though acknowledging his power. Kaede let out a gleeful cheer, her excitement echoing through the cavernous temple. Toru allowed himself a satisfied smirk as they stepped inside the inner sanctum, where the legendary sword awaited. The weapon rested in plain sight atop a marble pedestal, its blade gleaming with an ethereal light. It appeared almost fused to the stone, as though it had grown from the very heart of the pedestal itself. Even with his immense strength, Toru found the sword incredibly resistant. He gritted his teeth and tugged at the hilt, but the blade refused to budge. Sweat dripped down his brow as he tried again and again, each pull more forceful than the last. Kaede watched with bated breath, her faith in him unwavering despite the struggle. Finally, with a determined roar and a final heave, Toru freed the sword from its pedestal. The blade seemed to hum with life as he gripped it firmly, a rush of energy coursing through his body. Kaede's eyes sparkled with pride as she revealed that the sacred weapons were designed to adapt to their wielder, growing stronger as their bearer did. Toru looked at the blade in his hand, its weight perfectly balanced despite its size. As the realization of its power settled in, he couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and awe. Kaede, practically glowing with joy, clapped her hands together and told him he was destined for greatness. He then recalled that none of this would have been possible without Kaede's guidance and assistance. He deeply appreciated her for all she had done, yet she remained as humble as ever. Hearing such words of praise filled Toru with pride, something he had never experienced with his previous group. As he and Kaede exited the building, Toru couldn't help but feel that once they reached the city, the two would form their own team and embark on adventures together. Meanwhile, a satisfied smile lingered on Kaede's lips. She was simply content to be by her master's side. Back at Toru's old home, Sain was engaged in intimate activities with the other female members of the team. It appeared that they had been at it for hours, as the girls were out of breath, and even Sain had to sit down for a moment to catch his breath. His thoughts wandered back to Toru, and an amused smile spread across his face. He seemed pleased by his betrayal of his best friend. Not only had he exiled him from the group, but he had also stolen his fiancé. Sain moved towards Nei and Sara, his eyes glowing with a sinister intensity. Using his secret ability, the demonic eye of lure, he hypnotized them, bending them to his will. This was the skill that had allowed him to turn everyone against Toru, its power so overwhelming that a single glance from Sain was enough for Lisa to forget all of her feelings for Toru and betray him. Sain had always harbored a deep jealousy toward his counterpart, Toru. Toru possessed a natural charm that seemed to effortlessly draw the opposite sex to him, a trait that filled Sain, his supposed best friend, with contempt. So, when Sain unlocked the power of the Eye of Lure, it didn't take long for him to turn his attentions to Lisa, his fiancée. She was the first to fall under his spell. Soon, he had enough control over the entire party, manipulating them to abandon the poor warrior without hesitation. As Sain reveled in the sensual attention from the two girls, a sense of satisfaction washed over him. No longer did he have to deal with the burden of low-level team members. He was free to focus solely on the task at hand, defeating the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord, a creature that appeared with a disaster each year, was said to belong to either the demonic or human tribes. Sain's thoughts drifted to Lisa, still lost in his enchantment. He couldn't help but imagine the fame and wealth he would acquire once he defeated the sacred being. The world would bow before him, and he would be lauded as a hero. With a bellow of victory, Sain reveled in the idea of living his best life, unaware that his overconfidence would soon be shattered. His moment of joy came to a sudden halt when he received the news that the legendary dragon he was meant to slay had already been killed. Shocked, Sain asked the old man who had managed to slay such a mighty beast. The answer was a disappointment. No one knew, only that the decapitated body had been found in the forest. Anger surged through him, and with a grunt of frustration, Sain punched the trunk of a nearby tree. Lisa, Nei, and Sara, still under his spell, tried to comfort him, offering faint smiles as they surrounded him. Sain, forcing a smile, then shifted his focus to the sacred temple of arms, his mind already plotting his next move. Sain's fury reached new heights when he arrived at the sacred temple of arms, only to find it completely empty. His rage spiraled out of control, and when Lisa, still under his spell, reached out to him, he slapped her aside with a venomous growl, threatening to kill her if she ever dared touch him again. As his anger boiled, a troubling thought crossed his mind. Was Toru somehow behind all of this? Ever since his exile, everything had started to go wrong. Yet the idea that a low-level warrior like Toru could defeat a red dragon and steal a sacred weapon was utterly absurd. It was in this moment that Sain decided to adjust his strategy. The way to secure his place in the public eye, he reasoned, was to complete the dungeon of Lamtata. When he asked the local for directions, the man simply pointed forward, where a massive hole awaited them. As Sain and his group approached, he suddenly sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the realization that some unknown warrior had beaten him to this mission. His mind reeled, struggling to grasp how he had been so outpaced. A month earlier, Tsuihou and Kaede had been in the town of Luntada to receive their adventurer cards. Kaede, at the Junior D rank, was excited to start her journey, while Tsuihou had been reduced to a mere B rank. As they wandered through the lively town, Kaede remarked on the strong smell of alcohol in the air. Tsuihou, with a casual shrug, explained that this was normal in a town known for its entertainment and festivities. She tells him that he doesn't have to be in a place like this because he has Kaede. However, Tsuihou didn't pay that much attention to her words. In an attempt to distract him, she pointed out a dungeon nearby, eager to change the subject and steer his attention elsewhere. Tsuihou, already aware of the dungeon's existence, informed Kaede that they would explore it the next day. He then took the time to explain the purpose of dungeons for adventurers. Many adventurers made a living by battling the monsters within and selling the treasure and materials they collected. More determined adventurers, however, aimed to reach the bottom of the dungeon, where the core stone was located. This rare and valuable material not only provided significant rewards but also granted the finder multiple skills and other abilities. The following day, Tsuihou and Kaede delved into the first floor of the dungeon. Tsuihou couldn't help but be impressed by how capable the little girl was with her magic. She defeated wild creatures with ease, and her experience multiplier allowed her to level up quickly. Her determination to become as strong as her master was evident as she single-handedly slew monster after monster, showing no signs of slowing down. By the time they reached the third floor, Kaede had reached level 30, but her drive to continue pushing forward remained unyielding, despite the growing pile of treasure they had amassed. Tsuihou, concerned for her well-being, urged her to slow down. He cautioned that overexerting herself could be more harmful than beneficial. He handed her a magical storage bag to help carry the treasures, and the two made their way back to the surface. Kaede, with a victorious smile, had collected an impressive amount of coins. Without hesitation, she ordered a massive feast to celebrate her hard work, eager to share it with her master. Tsuihou hesitated at first, unsure about taking part in the meal, but Kaede's pout was enough to melt his resolve. Reluctantly, he began filling his plate. After a satisfying meal and a day well spent, the two made their way home. As they walked, Tsuihou couldn't help but silently thank his lucky stars for having such a little companion by his side. She had brought a renewed sense of purpose and joy into his life, making him feel like life was worth living again. The next morning, Tsuihou was abruptly awakened by Kaede nudging him. With blurry vision, he could just make out her figure sitting next to him, trying to cover herself with a sheet. As his eyes gradually cleared, he was struck by the sight of her, and his heart skipped a beat. In the span of a single night, she had changed dramatically. Her ears had grown out, now resembling soft, fluffy bunny ears. But that wasn't the only change. Kaede had transformed into a full-fledged woman, her body now unmistakably feminine. A bead of sweat trickled down Tsuihou's cheek as he questioned if this was really Kaede. The question marks floated in his mind as he tried to make sense of what was happening. His eyes were fixed on her, unable to believe the transformation. Kaede, blushing and struggling to cover her newly developed form with the thin piece of cloth, seemed just as embarrassed. Tsuihou, still stunned, wondered if her rapid growth had something to do with her sudden increase in level. Sitting with his legs crossed, Tsuihou listened intently as Kaede explained, her voice tinged with uncertainty. She mentioned that she had once heard that when a child surpasses level 20, their body can grow rapidly overnight to balance the newfound power. Tsuihou's mind began piecing things together. He admitted that the concept of body and power balancing was not entirely impossible, especially since his own race had changed when he leveled up. But as the pieces fell into place, one final thought hit him. He had never imagined that such a transformation would turn her into such a stunning beauty overnight. His gaze lingered on Kaede, who stood before him, waiting for him to finish processing everything. The realization slowly dawned on him, and he had to admit to himself that he could no longer think of her as just a little girl. Eventually, Tsuihou sighed, giving up on trying to make sense of it all. With a slight blush on his face, he asked the one question that had been nagging at him since he woke up. "Kaede, why are you naked?" Tsuihou was already caught in an intense dilemma as he desperately asked Kaede to put some clothes on. The sight of her new, grown body, especially with the bunny ears adorning her head, was enough to leave him flustered. Kaede, embarrassed but still eager to find something to wear, picked up her old clothes, only to realize they had been torn apart during her transformation. She had nothing else to put on. Frustrated and impatient, Tsuihou sighed and told her to just wear his clothes for the time being. At the mention of wearing his clothes, Kaede's eyes lit up with excitement. She eagerly grabbed the shirt, holding it to her face and taking a deep sniff, claiming that it truly smelled like him. Tsuihou, struggling to push away the intrusive thoughts that began to creep into his mind, turned around to give her some privacy to change. He figured the shirt would be big enough for her, but when he peeked over his shoulder, he realized it was more than just the shirt she needed. She would definitely need a pair of pants too. Quickly, he turned back around, covering his eyes as he handed her a pair of his pants, feeling his face flush. Later that day, the two went shopping, and Kaede managed to find a perfect outfit for herself. She twirled in front of Tsuihou, asking for his opinion. Tsuihou, seeing how well the clothes fit her, commented that they suited her perfectly. Kaede's face turned bright red at the compliment, and Tsuihou thought to himself that, despite her physical growth, she was still very much a little girl on the inside. Curious, Tsuihou asked if she could handle the iron fan she had picked up. Kaede eagerly grabbed it and began waving it around in every direction, proving she had no trouble with it. Tsuihou noted that with the fan, she would be able to perform 2 magical attacks at once, something that would make her an even more formidable ally. After enjoying some light-hearted moments together, the duo headed out of town. As they walked through the streets, the citizens couldn't help but stop and stare in amazement at the pair. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd as they marveled at Kaede's beauty. Some couldn't help but wonder who she was and why such a gorgeous woman was in the city. A few even whispered amongst themselves, fantasizing about having a slave like her. As they made their way through the town, the stares and compliments directed at Kaede made the duo feel increasingly awkward. Tsuihou found the constant attention on her beauty and the envy from the men surrounding them to be rather annoying. He tried to shrug it off, focusing on Kaede's excited chatter. She beamed as she eagerly told him that today, she was going to earn a lot of money for him. Tsuihou, however, reminded her that she didn't need to worry about it. He still had plenty of funds left over from when he had slain the dragon. For today, he wanted to focus on leveling her up and had come prepared with bags of food and water for the journey. Kaede, still full of youthful excitement, wagged her tail as she shouted that today would be all about fun. She eagerly reassured Tsuihou that, despite her transformation, she was still the same on the inside. Her energy was infectious, and Tsuihou couldn't help but smile. Their first quest was to deal with a squad of armed skeletons. Kaede, without hesitation, used her aerial blast to send them flying, effortlessly dispatching them. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she unleashed a barrage of iron fan blasts, decimating the rest of the enemies. Tsuihou applauded her performance, genuinely proud of her. However, as Kaede continued to rack up victories, Tsuihou began to feel a bit bored. His eyelids grew heavy as Kaede's level quickly soared to 50, and with the level requirement for the 4th floor being only 15, the day was moving along too easily. Noticing his tiredness, Kaede asked what was wrong, and Tsuihou explained that he had woken up early that morning and was feeling a bit sleepy. In an instant, Kaede's eyes lit up with an idea. At lightning speed, she used her iron fans to clean up the area, quickly clearing away all the debris from the battle. Then, she laid down a soft carpet and offered him a place to rest on her lap. Tsuihou, more than happy to oblige, reclined and remarked that she smelled good, content in the simple moment. He drifted off to sleep, his head resting on her lap. After a while, he woke up, surprised to find a large pile of new skeleton bones scattered around them. Kaede, with her usual enthusiasm, had taken care of the cleanup, and Tsuihou was impressed with how much she had accomplished in such a short time. While Tora was resting, unaware, the attackers came for them, but Kaede swiftly handled the situation without hesitation. Toro, still peacefully asleep with his head resting on her lap, was stunned when he realized she had defeated them so effortlessly. Kaede, ever playful, flicked him gently with her tail, dusting him off as he stirred. A strange sensation washed over him, like a sudden burst of energy, and he began to feel as if he were tapping into some sort of sage mode. Then it hit him. He had no idea what her current stats were. Curiosity bubbling up, he decided to ask, though he hesitated, unsure if she would be open to sharing. Contrary to his concerns, Kaede was eager to oblige. With a smile, she revealed her details. Her level was 50, her race was a white fox, and she was 15 years old. As Tora scanned the rest of her information, he noticed several abilities that seemed to belong to a mage. Toro's eyes widened when he saw the power boost ability, recognizing it as a rare trait typically possessed by only the most renowned mages. It was then that a sudden realization struck him. This girl, right here, was on her way to becoming something extraordinary. He had only asked to confirm his suspicions, but now that he understood the true scope of her abilities, he felt even more certain. With newfound confidence, he asked if she'd be interested in venturing deeper into the dungeon, and Kaede eagerly agreed. By the time they reached the 10th floor, Tora had a clearer understanding of how Kaede's magic worked. Her strength seemed to grow at an astonishing rate, far surpassing the amount she consumed. One enemy after another fell before her without her needing any help from him. At first, he had feared for her safety when faced with goblin riders, thinking them to be formidable opponents. But as the battle went on, he found himself pitying the goblins instead. Soon enough, they made it to the 20th floor, where Kaede unlocked her 150th level, marking yet another milestone in her impressive journey. Taking a break to replenish their energy with some food, Tora couldn't help but wonder if there were any tricks to using magic more effectively. With a thoughtful expression, he asked Kaede for advice. She replied simply, saying that the key was to focus on imagining the image clearly in his mind. He nodded, closing his palm and visualizing a flame in his thoughts. When he opened his hand, a small, flickering flame appeared, much to his surprise. He marveled at the result, realizing how much simpler magic seemed when he followed her instructions. By the time they reached the 90th floor, they encountered enemies so powerful that even Tora had never faced them before. He immediately warned Kaede to be cautious, but as he observed her, a sudden realization dawned on him. He had nothing to worry about. By this point, Kaede was level 200 and, with a swift motion, she unleashed a freezing ability that wiped out all the opponents without her breaking a sweat. Tora stood in awe, watching her work. On the 13th floor, the duo couldn't sense any enemies at all. Just as Tora was about to question their safety, a course suddenly materialized before them. Kaede's eyes sparkled with excitement as she realized it was a sign. They must have reached the end of the dungeon. Without hesitation, she urged Tora to touch it. The moment his hand made contact, everything changed, marking the end of their journey through the first dungeon. However, as soon as he touched the core, Tora unexpectedly passed out. When he regained consciousness, he was greeted by Kaede's voice calling his name urgently. She told him that the dungeon had disappeared, and they now found themselves at the bottom of some vast trench, with a starry sky above them. Looking down, Tora noticed something odd. Both he and Kaede now wore rings on their fingers, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. They assumed that the rings were the reward for their swift dungeon clearance. As they examined the rings, 3 screens appeared before them, detailing the rewards they had earned. The first reward was a pair of rings of disguise, which allowed them to hide their status, disguise someone else, or even assume another person's status altogether. The second reward was a special fast clear bonus. The duo would be granted their very own dungeon. With this, their adventure in this particular dungeon had come to an end, but new possibilities were just beginning to unfold. Tora effortlessly scooped Kaede up in his arms and leaped out of the trench they had found themselves in, landing softly on solid ground. 2 days passed as they traveled toward the city of Eneric, with the goal of exploring the ruins of the ancient gods. Tora wasn't sure if the trip had much point, but there were certain things he was hoping to uncover. The reason behind the destruction and disappearance of the once thriving civilization remained a mystery, but it was clear that this area had once been home to a highly advanced society, known as the Great Racers. Tora had always been obsessed with ruins and their secrets, so the long journey was an exciting prospect for him. As they traveled, they passed by a few buildings still standing from the era of the Great Racers, further fueling Tora's curiosity. During their trek, Kaede asked if he had decided on a name for their party. Tora thought for a moment, then grinned. After a short pause, he declared that their party would be called the Roaming Brigade, a name that suited their adventurous spirit. With some free time now on their hands, Tora asked Kaede about her past, specifically how she ended up as a slave. Kaede hesitated for a moment, But before she could answer, their conversation was interrupted by the sudden attack of a band of bandits. A carriage in front of them was being ambushed, and without missing a beat, Tora and Kaede rushed to help. Tora unleashed a powerful breath, sending the bandits flying, while Kaede effortlessly caught an arrow with her bare hands. The bandits, realizing they were outmatched, stood frozen in terror. The woman in the carriage, who had been the target of the bandits, introduced herself as Marinata, the daughter of Count Rota. Tora blushed upon seeing her, and Kaede, noticing his reaction, panicked slightly. After Tora introduced himself, Marinata, ever so graceful, took his hand and invited him to her mansion to express her gratitude. It seemed that their adventure had taken an unexpected turn, one that would bring them face to face with nobility. It turned out that Marinata was from Generic, the very place where the duo had originally been heading. They soon arrived at her mansion, where her personal servant, Urara, greeted them and escorted them to their rooms. Tora, upon seeing the incredibly comfortable bed, couldn't resist and leaped onto it like a child, bouncing with delight. He quickly realized his mistake when he caught a glimpse of Marinata still standing in the doorway, watching him. With a chuckle, she smiled and casually invited him to join her on a trip whenever he felt like it, not at all fazed by his childish behavior. The next day, Marinata took them out around the city, showing them the sights. Tora was genuinely surprised by how freely she moved about, especially considering the constant danger they faced. Even though Urara was always by her side, protecting her, he couldn't understand how she could be so confident in her safety. That's when Urara casually revealed that she was an S-ranked adventurer, which explained her confidence and calm demeanor in the face of potential threats. Meanwhile, Kaede and Marinata had formed a fast friendship, and the two of them seemed inseparable. Marinata took Kaede to a sweet shop and gave her some allowance, while Tora handed her the money he had been saving up. As they were having fun, Tora couldn't help but reflect on his intentions. He had been saving for Kaede, hoping one day to free her if she so desired. But beneath that thought, a deep ache lingered in his heart, one that was left there by Lisa's memory. Tora admitted to himself that even now, the pain of thinking about her still hurt, and he hoped that by forgetting the past, he might one day find peace, and not need a slave at all. Later, they came across a large statue in the town square, and Marinata proudly explained that it had been built when her father, the lord of the city, was young. She and the townspeople had created it together, and she held it dear. Just as Tora was about to comment on how impressive it was, the ground suddenly began to shake. He wondered if it was an earthquake, but before he could react, the statue crumbled into pieces, and from the earth, strange, tentacle-like vines shot up, writhing as if they had a life of their own. The peaceful day had taken a dark turn, and Tora knew they were about to face a new danger. The tentacles surged from the ground, wrapping around Marinata and the other citizens, lifting them high into the air with terrifying force. Tora was caught off guard, unprepared for the sudden attack. It quickly became clear that the tentacles had selectively chosen their victims. After swinging the helpless citizens around for a while, the tentacles suddenly retracted, pulling them back into the depths of the earth. The only trace left behind was the crumbled remains of the statue and a giant, seemingly endless hole in the ground where it once stood. Urara, Tora, and Kaede stared at the gaping trench, assessing their situation. Around them, the cries of the citizens filled the air as they screamed for their loved ones. Tora's teeth clenched in frustration as he realized that many of the civilians, including Marinata, had been kidnapped. But there was no time to process the situation. Urara had already vowed her life to protect her mistress. Seeing Marinata disappear into the hands of their unknown enemy drove her into a panic. Without hesitation, she leaped toward the hole, ready to follow after her master. Tora, however, wasn't about to let her go alone. He didn't stop her, but he called out to Kaede. She didn't need to hear the words to understand what he meant. Without hesitation, Kaede nodded, her determination clear. Tora knew that they couldn't waste time. If they were going to find Marinata and the others, they needed to act quickly. Together, the duo jumped into the hole, chasing after Urara. As they descended, Tora called out to her, asking to come along. Urara, torn between her loyalty to Marinata and her duties as a servant, hesitated. She loved her master deeply, but she couldn't allow herself to put others in harm's way, especially not their guests. Tora gripped his sword tightly as the trio plunged into the abyss, their bodies swallowed by the darkness below. The trench turned out to be far deeper than they had initially realized. The fall was long, and the risk of injury was high. But Kaede, ever resourceful, quickly chanted a spell, weaving her magic to create an air cushion that gently slowed their descent. The trio landed softly at the bottom, their feet touching the cold, hard ground without a scratch. The underground world they found themselves in was even more mysterious than they'd expected. The air was thick with darkness, almost suffocating in its depth. But with Kaede by their side, a powerful pro-mage, there was no need to fear the unknown. Wasting no time, Kaede conjured a small light with her iron fan, creating a glowing orb that floated above them, following their every move and illuminating the path ahead. As the light revealed their surroundings, they began to take in the enormity of the place. It was clear that they were standing in the midst of something ancient and grand, and the layout of the underground world stretched out in every direction. Urara, ever knowledgeable, spoke up, explaining that they were in the underground ruins. The city of Einrich had been built on top of this vast archaeological site, and now they found themselves deep within it, essentially trapped in a labyrinth beneath the surface. There was no going back now, and every step forward led them deeper into the unknown. Suddenly, Kaede called Tora over to show him something strange. As he approached, he noticed the ground around them was covered in a thick, slippery mucus. It was a bizarre and unsettling sight. Kaede examined it closely and suspected that the mucus might be linked to the creature that had kidnapped Marinata and the others. However, the mucus didn't seem to be randomly scattered. It followed a specific, deliberate pattern, leading in one direction. Urara, ever pragmatic, suggested that they might be able to track the creature if they followed the path of mucus. It could be their best lead in locating whatever had taken the citizens. With the trio now more determined than ever, they prepared to follow the trail, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead in the heart of the underground ruins. Tora took the lead, carefully planning their formation. He decided that he would be at the front, prepared to face any enemies that might attack head-on. Urara was assigned to guard the rear, keeping an eye on any threats from behind, while Kaede would stay in the middle, ready to respond to any immediate danger and remain vigilant. With everyone in position, they readied their weapons, Urara gripping her kunai with deadly precision, while Kaede pulled out her iron fan. The trio set off, determined to succeed in their mission and uncover the secrets of the underground labyrinth. As they made their way through the maze, the walls seemed to be covered in the same eerie vines that had erupted from the ground earlier. Suddenly, the trio was ambushed by a group of ogres. These creatures, unlike the goblins they had encountered before, carried weapons of their own and seemed to be more formidable. However, despite their size and strength, the ogres were no match for the three of them. The battle was over quickly, with each of the trio dispatching their foes with ease. Tora, frustrated by the seeming endlessness of the labyrinth, asked the others how much deeper the place could possibly go. Urara, who had ventured into the maze multiple times before, answered that she had only managed to make it through 4 levels, and she hadn't dared to go deeper, unsure of what might be lurking in the shadows. As they continued, Tora, now more familiar with Kaede's powers, asked her if she had picked up Marinata's scent yet. Kaede, concentrating for a moment, confirmed that she could indeed smell something familiar. It was coming from the same direction as the slimy mucus they had been tracking earlier. With this new lead, the trio pressed on, but Tora's focus began to slip. In his distraction, he didn't notice the monstrous dog that had quietly crept up behind him until it was almost too late. The creature lunged at him, but Urara, though a bit farther away, was quick to react. She hurled her kunai with impeccable precision, striking the dog and killing it with a single shot. Tora, shaken but unharmed, couldn't help but be impressed by Urara's level of skill and calm under pressure. Turning to her with a look of respect, he asked what her usual role was. With a plain expression, her face emotionless as always, Urara casually replied, "I'm an assassin." Her words were matter-of-fact, as if her deadly prowess was simply part of the job. Kaede, sensing a shift in the air, quickly interrupted his thoughts. She remarked that Marinata's scent was growing stronger, meaning they were close to their destination. The trio continued forward, and soon they found themselves standing at the edge of a bridge, its surface lined with flickering fire. The bridge led to yet another colossal gate, topped with a cryptic sculpture that seemed to watch over them. But this time, they weren't alone. At the entrance stood a massive army of goblins, their armor gleaming ominously in the dim light. Unlike the previous goblins they had faced, this group exuded a more dangerous, ruthless energy. Tora's eyes narrowed, sensing the difference immediately. The commander of the goblins, a towering figure with horns protruding from his head, sneered at the trio. "I never expected you to make it this far." The goblin commander growled, his voice dripping with disdain. He looked at Urara and Kaede, his grin widening as he began to make crude remarks. "But now that we've caught sight of you two, I think we'll enjoy ourselves." The goblins eagerly licked their swords, clearly delighted by the prospect of battling the humans and their playthings. Tora gritted his teeth, his hand tightening around his sword. The situation was grim. Kaede, stepping forward with a determined glint in her eyes, made it clear she wouldn't let the battle consume them all. "I'll carve a path for you, master," she said, her voice unwavering. The goblins laughed mockingly at her declaration. "Humans are so stupid," one of them spat, and with that they rushed at the trio, eager to overwhelm them. But before they could even make it halfway, something unexpected happened. Kaede, her iron fan held firmly in her hand, unleashed a wave of magic. A thick wall of ice exploded around the goblins, cutting them off from the trio. The demons looked around in shock, realizing they had been surrounded by an impenetrable barrier. Tora, smirking, prepared himself to charge into the fray. But before he could move, Urara and Kaede both turned to him, their expressions serious. "Leave the goblins to us," Kaede said, her voice cold with confidence. "Go save Marinata." Reluctantly, Tora nodded. They were right. His priority was to get through the gate and reach Marinata. With a final glance at his companions, he rushed forward, pushing past the demons who were now struggling against the walls of ice. In one swift, powerful strike, he delivered a blow that shattered the gate, sending it crashing to the ground. Inside, seated upon a grand throne, was a one-horned, bearded man who exuded an air of twisted power. The man was flanked by a grotesque creature, an enormous sloth-like being, its body adorned with slimy tentacles that writhed and thrashed. The man, perched upon his throne, sneered at Tora as he spoke, his voice dripping with malice. "Ah, the food for my pet has finally arrived," he mocked, gesturing to the monstrous, slug-like creature beside him. With a swift motion, the grotesque being's tentacles shot out, capturing Tora in an instant. Tora struggled against the thick, slimy appendages that wrapped around him, his mind racing. "Why did you attack the city?" he demanded, his voice sharp despite the situation. The man's eyes glinted as he leaned forward, his tones sinister. "Einrich is connected to another city through these underground passages," he explained, a twisted smile curling on his lips. "I intend to bring down the country, and to do that, I need to eliminate the lords who hold it all together. Taking the city is just the first step." Tora's frustration boiled over as he heard the man's audacious plan. With a powerful roar, he tore apart the tentacles holding him, his fury making him almost forget about the looming threat. The man's grin faltered slightly, but he quickly regained his composure, warning, "Don't step over the line, warrior. You wouldn't want to test me." But Tora, determined and unyielding, saw it as nothing more than a challenge. Without hesitation, he began walking toward the man, his steps unwavering. The ground beneath him suddenly erupted as the man unleashed a barrage of grenade-like explosions, the force of them shaking the very air around them. The man laughed, watching the destruction unfold. "No one could survive that," he declared with certainty, his voice full of triumph. But when the smoke cleared, his eyes widened in disbelief. There stood Tora, completely unscathed, his expression calm and unfazed. "Is that all you've got?" Tora called out, his voice steady as he glared at the man. "That attack won't even leave a scratch on me." The man, overwhelmed by the unstoppable force before him, desperately launched another barrage of grenades at Toru. However, Toru remained unfazed, walking through the explosions without a scratch. Closing the distance with a final step, Toru swiftly cut down both the man and his monstrous slug companion in a single strike, the beast's death echoing through the chamber. As the man lay dying, he asked if Toru was the prophesied hero, but Toru, calm and composed, dismissed the idea, calling himself an ordinary warrior before walking away. With the threat eliminated, the underground labyrinth lost its most formidable foe. Marianne slowly awoke in Urara's arms, disoriented but alive. As she processed her surroundings, memories of her abduction and the terror resurfaced. Seeing other survivors nearby, she calmed herself. Spotting Toru and Kaede standing confidently, their presence reassured her, bringing a sense of comfort and relief. Toru stepped forward to clarify the situation, calmly explaining that a monster had emerged from the underground ruins. Despite the giant hole left behind, the city remained intact, with no fatalities and only minor injuries. Marianne, visibly relieved, exhaled deeply as the weight of her worst fears lifted. Curious, she asked who had saved them, assuming it was her father. Before anyone could respond, Urara gently corrected her, expressing gratitude as she revealed that Toru and Kaede had been the ones to risk their lives for the rescue. Toru, downplaying the praise, shrugged and explained that he had simply done what was necessary to keep people safe. Marianne's eyes widened in disbelief. She had imagined a powerful figure leading her rescue, but the sight of Toru and Kaede, ordinary yet courageous, left her speechless. They had risked everything for her without hesitation, and that realization hit her hard. As the news spread among the gathered citizens, a wave of gratitude swept through the crowd. One by one, people knelt, offering thanks and respect to their unexpected saviors. Toru and Kaede shared a quiet glance, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. But for the people of Einrich, their heroism was undeniable. Just as Toru started to regain his composure, Marianne wrapped him in a sudden, heartfelt hug, catching him completely off guard. She thanked him sincerely, her cheek resting against his, and Toru felt his pulse spike, paralyzed by the unexpected closeness. Kaede's eyes narrowed as she watched the scene unfold. Her voice, laced with playful sarcasm, broke the moment. She casually pointed out that Marianne seemed a bit too close, her tone light but clearly suggestive. Toru, still processing the hug, managed a nervous laugh, trying to downplay the tension. But his flushed face betrayed him, and it was clear he was battling the awkward mix of flattery and discomfort, especially under Kaede's sharp gaze. Back at the castle, Marianne embraced her father in a tearful reunion, the kind of emotional scene that felt pulled straight from a fairy tale. Toru and Kaede watched from a distance, letting the moment unfold without intrusion. Kaede broke the silence with a thoughtful comment, acknowledging Toru's impressive feat of defeating one of the Demon King's top generals. Toru, caught off guard, questioned how she knew about the general's rank. Kaede's calm demeanor didn't waver as she explained that the general had mentioned it during their battle. While he was the weakest of the six, his strength had still been formidable, a testament to Toru's victory. Toru's stomach betrayed him with a loud growl, cutting through the emotional atmosphere and earning amused looks from Marianne and her father. The lord approached him, gratitude evident in his eyes as he placed a firm hand on Toru's shoulder. He thanked him sincerely for saving Marianne not once, but twice. Toru, clearly uncomfortable with the praise, awkwardly rubbed the back of his neck, insisting it had all been a coincidence. Marianne, not missing a beat, saw her chance. Smiling sweetly, she suggested that her father reward Toru for his bravery, her tone leaving little room for argument. The lord paused, absorbing Marianne's suggestion before nodding with determination. He assured Toru that he would express his gratitude in a meaningful way, acknowledging the courage it took to save his daughter. Just as Toru opened his mouth to respond, Urara stepped forward, delivering an unexpected update. She informed the lord that Toru had also defeated one of the Demon King's top generals. The lord's eyes widened in surprise, his expression shifting from gratitude to deep contemplation. The weight of this revelation sank in, and after a moment, his gaze sharpened with resolve. A simple reward wouldn't suffice. Toru's actions called for something far greater. Toru blinked in surprise, caught off guard by the lord's generosity. He hadn't expected any reward, much less something significant. When the lord casually inquired about his plans to visit the capital, Toru was further perplexed as the man quickly announced he would send a letter, offering no explanation. With a knowing smile, the lord reassured Toru and Kaede they could stay as long as they wished, adding that Marianne would keep them entertained. The evening transitioned into a grand feast, where Toru and Kaede relished every bite, their earlier hunger now fully satisfied. As the meal wound down, Toru, still brimming with curiosity, turned to Marianne. His voice carried a spark of excitement as he asked if they could explore the underground ruins, barely concealing his enthusiasm. Marianne's expression shifted to one of concern as she heard Toru's plan. "The underground ruins?" she repeated, clearly uneasy. "Why would you want to go back to such a terrifying place?" Toru, undeterred, shrugged with a smile, his eyes bright with excitement. "As an adventurer, I have to see it for myself. It's like an unexplored dungeon, and I've always had a fascination with ancient ruins, especially those left by forgotten races." His words piqued the room's curiosity, but they also deepened the concern. Kaede's protective instincts flared as she narrowed her eyes at him. "If Toru goes down there, Marianne will follow him, no matter what," she remarked, a hint of certainty in her tone. Marianne, her expression resolute yet gentle, spoke up, insisting that she understood the risks but still wanted to accompany them. "I promise I won't be a burden," she added, her eyes locking onto Toru's with a quiet determination. Toru sighed, knowing there was no way he could stop her. "All right, you can come," he agreed, but on one condition. "Only if Aurora and Kaede promise to stay with you. I'll lead the way and deal with anything that comes at us. If things get too dangerous, we retreat immediately. No exceptions." The next day, the air was thick with anticipation as Toru and Kaede waited for the others to arrive. Soon Aurora appeared, sharp and poised in her usual assassin's attire. Behind her, Marianne entered, fully armored from head to toe, leaving no part of her body exposed. Toru blinked in surprise at the sight of her, clearly taken aback. Marianne smiled sheepishly when she caught his look. She explained that she had told her father about their plans, and he insisted she wear the armor for protection, not trusting the underground ruins. Toru chuckled, commenting that her father wasn't taking any chances, and suggested they'd make sure the armor wasn't needed. The group then set off toward the entrance to the ruins, anticipation growing with each step. Toru paused, surprised by Marianne's new outfit, which was more suited for movement than the bulky armor. Shifting his focus, Toru urged the group to stay sharp as they moved forward. He reminded them that the first 2 floors had been cleared, and they were heading deeper into unknown territory. Marianne leaned in to warn him about the next floor being flooded with demons. Toru's excitement grew at the mention of demons, but he quickly reassured her, saying he'd handle the dangerous areas and that her safety came first. Kaede stiffened, her nostrils flaring as she sensed demons ahead. She quickly activated her appraisal skill and identified a large mushroom-like monster nearby. The trio moved cautiously, but things took an unexpected turn when a rat scurried across the floor, triggering mushrooms to sprout from a vine and engulf the creature. Kaede's appraisal skill flared again, and she noted the vines were poisonous, warning the group to be careful. Toru took charge, ordering the others to stay back. He explained he'd handled the situation alone, as the poison wouldn't affect him and he had antidotes in case anything went wrong. Kaede protested, insisting on coming with Toru, but he reassured her with a smile, reminding her of his level 300 and ability to handle the situation alone. After a quick farewell, Toru entered the mushroom-filled room, carefully navigating the vines. His high level and poison resistance allowed him to avoid the effects of the dangerous plants. He swiftly dealt with the mushroom monsters that emerged. As he explored further, Toru found a collection of books covered in spiderwebs and several treasure boxes. Opening one, he found potions and elixirs, including a particular elixir and a mysterious key, both of which he pocketed, wondering about the secrets they might unlock. Later, after he came back, they even discovered an underground fortresses. "And we gonna ignore these 2 who are fighting over Toru?" Before they could investigate further, he heard Marianne's voice calling from behind. Marianne hesitated but then spoke up, asking Toru to teach her how to fight. She didn't want to keep relying on Urara for protection and wanted to be able to defend herself. Toru was caught off guard by her request but saw the sincerity in her eyes. Despite her noblewoman status, she was determined to take matters into her own hands. With a warm smile, Toru reassured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. He agreed to teach her, but before anything could have happened, his skills suddenly changed, with a radiant light from the sky that even the city could see. Everyone worried and he apologized for scaring them, informing that his skills just changed. And after taking some time to check his skills, they decided to continue. The idea of training Marianne filled him with a sense of purpose, and he was ready to face the challenges ahead, not just to protect her, but to help her become a capable fighter herself. As the group moved deeper into the underground ruins, Toru remained vigilant, ensuring Marianne and Aurora stayed safe while also trying to make the most of the dungeon's rewards. The further they went, the more demons they encountered, testing Toru's skills. But he remained focused on his promise to teach Marianne how to fight and gain experience. Marianne, determined to shed her weakness, clung to every word Toru spoke. Toru was pleased with the group's progress and began teaching Marianne how to fight, emphasizing the importance of staying alert, keeping her eyes open, and trusting her instincts. He demonstrated basic stances and strikes, urging her to be confident. Marianne's enthusiasm grew, and soon she faced her first real test, a giant spider-like monster. Hesitant at first, she followed Toru's advice and defeated it, earning a level up. Excited, she and Aurora exchanged a glance, feeling ready for anything. Their newfound confidence made them a strong duo, but Toru cautioned them to stay prudent and suggested they head back after exploring enough for the day. Despite Toru's caution, Marianne was eager. She urged, "Just a little longer, Toru. There's so much more to see." Toru, realizing she wouldn't relent, sighed. "All right, but don't go too far." They ventured deeper into the dungeon, where demons appeared, and the terrain grew more dangerous. After a while, they reached what seemed like a dead end. Marianne and Aurora thought their journey for the day had ended, but Toru wasn't convinced. He ran his hand along the walls, searching for hidden passages. "This can't be it," he muttered, studying the dead end with suspicion. Kaede scanned the area with sharp eyes. "It looks like a dead end, but something feels off," she said. "Maybe an illusion or hidden path." However, they later discovered that it wasn't a dead end. On the other side of the wall was a hidden room. After inspecting it for some time, they found 2 eggs inside. Nobody knew why the eggs were there or how they had been abandoned in such a place for so long. Kaede decided to appraise them, believing they might contain summoned beasts. These creatures were thought to be artificial beings created by an ancient race, primarily used to assist in daily tasks but also capable of providing support during combat, depending on their type. The eggs had been preserved for long-term survival, and it was said that anyone could awaken them by pouring a significant amount of magical power into them. Toru started channeling his magic into one of the eggs, but it wasn't enough. Determined, he poured even more of his power into it, and everyone in the room could feel the immense surge of magical energy. After some time, the egg finally cracked, revealing a fluffy, one-eyed creature. The creature was adorable, and Kaede, unable to resist its charm, quickly washed him off, so she could hug him. Surprisingly, the little beast lifted Kaede onto its back, and started flying in the whole room, as if it was meant to carry her. Toru, observing this, realized the creature could be useful for transportation. He decided to name it Panda. Kaede introduced Panda to Urara and Marianta, both of whom found it incredibly cute. From the other egg, a snake-like monster emerged. They decided to name this new creature Razuk. Back at the castle, they organized their relics, healing potions, and medicines to prepare for whatever came next. Unfamiliar with the items, Toru asked Kaede to use her appraisal skill. She quickly identified one as a rare elixir, impossible to find for sale. The lord suggested they visit the royal capital, where a wealthy noble or merchant might be interested in purchasing it, ideally at an auction for the affluent. Toru recalled such events and decided to sell some relics to the lord, saving others for the auction. He was stunned by the pile of cash the lord offered in exchange. Days passed as the group continued exploring the ruins and hunting demons. Marianne reached level 100, while Aurora hit level 80, both showing remarkable strength. Marianne's swordsmanship had become so refined it seemed the blade was part of her body. But when Toru mentioned leaving the city for the royal auction, Marianne's excitement waned. He had received an invitation from the court. As they prepared to part, Marianne confided in Kaede, feeling envious of her freedom to travel with Toru. She wished she could explore the world, but as the count's daughter, her future was already decided, marriage to a noble. Toru, sensing her pain, promised they would meet again. Marianne, on the verge of tears, was comforted by Kaede's hug before bidding them farewell, wishing to be in Kaede's place. Meanwhile, Sain found himself following in Toru's footsteps, though not as he had hoped. Furious, he discovered that a dungeon he had intended to conquer had already been completed a month ago. The bitter realization hit him. This was supposed to be his debut as a hero, but it had been wasted. In frustration, he began biting his nails, his mind racing with defeat. Sora, noticing his distress, asked if he was okay. Consumed by despair, Sain suddenly grabbed her by the throat. The other girls intervened before things escalated, but his delusions began to take over. Imagining everyone around him pitying him, he felt his grip on control slipping as the crowd grew, ready to involve the authorities. Sain realized the effects of the brainwashing were fading and activated his demon eye to cast the spell again, making the women his obedient puppets. One suggested returning to Armin's kingdom, proposing they start fresh using a new route, as their plans had relied on his acquisition of the sacred sword. Sain, enraged at the thought of kneeling before King Belciel and admitting failure, rejected the idea, deciding to pursue other sacred swords instead. Sain's anger flared when he heard about ruins in Anarch, an untapped opportunity. Eager to make his mark, his excitement dwindled when he learned that the Monument Brigade had already explored the ruins and defeated a demon army general. Florida's comment only fueled his frustration. His temper briefly cooled when Marianne entered, but his attempt to use his demonic eye of seduction failed, causing his eyes to bleed. Marianne quickly pointed a sword at his neck, demanding answers, while the Lord mocked his lack of the adventurer's heart. Humiliated, Sain threw a tantrum, shouting about his heroism before vowing to return to Armin, determined to regain his power and control. After leaving Anarch, Toru and Kaede continued refining their skills and gaining new titles and treasures, cementing their growing reputation. Even defeating a giant dragon had become routine. Their beasts, Panda and Ryosuke, remained rivals, with Panda stubbornly trying to outfly Ryosuke, only to fall short as his limit was barely 10 meters. Later, while preparing food, Kaede, eager to cook with techniques she'd learned from Urara, made a purple stew from charred fish and frog. To Toru's surprise, it was delicious, earning Kaede an affectionate cuddle, much to his embarrassment. But the moment was fleeting, as Toru's past resurfaced, memories of the girl who had left him for Sain. He vowed to never treat Kaede as anything less than an equal, determined to value her for who she was. The smell of Kaede's cooking attracted a group of massive wyverns, much larger than the ones they had faced before. However, Ryosuke effortlessly defeated all 5 creatures, leaving Toru stunned at his companion's overwhelming strength. Kaede suggested Ryosuke's power might be tied to Toru's bloodline, a theory that left him deep in thought. Arriving in the capital city of Armin, Toru was impressed by its grandeur. As they headed to deliver the Count's letter to Jonathan Rockbell, they encountered a commotion involving a runaway animal. Toru quickly calmed it, drawing the attention of the cart's owner, who turned out to be the vice president of the company. Grateful, he escorted them to Jonathan, who informed Toru of a significant reward awaiting him but advised him to return dressed more presentably. Despite the warm reception, Toru couldn't shake the feeling that trouble loomed. The next day, Toru, clad in a formal tuxedo, fidgeted with discomfort as the tight collar and stiff fabric felt suffocating. He voiced his irritation to Kaede, who looked stunning in a shimmering gown, her smile offering reassurance. She complimented his appearance, earning a half-hearted chuckle from him. Jonathan Rockbell soon arrived in a polished wagon and invited them inside. He explained that Marquis Reliance had arranged a meeting with a renowned figure who could offer Toru great benefits, though the details had to remain confidential. Their journey ended at a massive castle, leaving Toru and Kaede in awe. Inside, they were led to a guarded room where they waited for an announcement. The opulent space was filled with books, intricate furniture, and a mounted antelope head. A tall, bearded man entered, flanked by soldiers, King Armand. Without delay, he explained the Empire faced a grave threat and urgently needed their help. Toru was shaken when King Armand explained the threat they faced, the Death Queen, a monstrous entity capable of destroying entire villages. Her forces had already claimed countless lives, and the imperial capital was at risk. The king's grave tone underscored the urgency, leaving Toru and Kaede to absorb the weight of the task ahead. Without hesitation, Toru accepted the mission, impressing the king, who offered him land and the title of hero as a reward. Toru refused the title, preferring to stay out of the spotlight, and instead requested monetary compensation, which the king agreed to. To aid them, King Armand assigned Humu, the royal forces corps commander, to guide them to the ant's nest. Humu led them to the outskirts of an abandoned forest, where the aftermath of the battle was clear. The ground was littered with the corpses of fallen soldiers, the grim result of the Death Queen's wrath. The scale of the devastation made it clear that Toru and Kaede were the Empire's last hope. As they neared the nest, Kaede innocently asked if the ants were truly as dangerous as claimed, leaving both Toru and Humu stunned. Toru briefly wondered about her sheltered past, as the ants' vicious reputation was widely known. However, there was no time for reflection, and they soon realized they had wandered into enemy territory. Before they could react, a swarm of ants surrounded them. Humu panicked, doubting the adventurer's ability to handle the threat. But Toru swiftly proved him wrong, obliterating an entire legion of ants with a single swipe of his magical sword. Kaede followed up with a powerful air pressure attack, finishing off the remaining creatures effortlessly. Humu stood speechless, his jaw slack as Kaede froze the area with a spell, revealing the queen ant's lair. Embarrassed, he muttered that his role in the mission was over and left the rest to the adventurers. The entrance to the nest was narrow and ominous, but Toru knew that to end the threat, he had to confront the queen ant. He recalled a feature in his inventory, the Dungeon of Umtada. By activating it, Toru transformed the nest into a dungeon under his control, gaining a clearer layout of the tunnels and the advantage of being its dungeon master. With the dungeon now in his control, Toru and Kaede teleported to the heart of the nest, where they immediately encountered the queen ant. Enraged by their intrusion, she screeched and unleashed her hench ants. Kaede swiftly decimated the swarm with a single attack. The queen ant, however, began absorbing the fallen ant's energy, growing stronger. She roared and cast an ice snap, a powerful attack that caught Toru off guard, encasing him in an enormous iceberg. For a moment, the queen ant believed Toru was finished, her piercing gaze fixed on Kaede. But with a deafening crack, the iceberg shattered, revealing Toru, unharmed and defiant. His resilience only fueled the queen's rage. Unable to fathom how this human could withstand her high-level attacks, she triggered a powerful earthquake, shaking the ground beneath them. Toru narrowly avoided being caught in the collapsing earth, realizing close combat would be near impossible if she kept using such devastating strikes. The queen then shifted tactics, spraying formic acid in a deadly mist. Toru leapt to avoid it, but she spat another stream directly upward, narrowly missing him. While the acid couldn't harm him, Toru gritted his teeth, worried about his clothes. With a swing of his sword, he deflected the liquid in a dazzling arc and landed, eyes locked on his opponent. Realizing her power was no match for his, the queen ant unleashed a desperate barrage of attacks. Toru dodged with precision, closing the distance and, in a blur of motion, leapt to sever her massive head with a single, calculated swing of his sword. As the queen ant's colossal body collapsed with a thunderous crash, Toru sheathed his blade with a triumphant grin. "Another quest completed," he said, his voice echoing through the cavern as Kaede approached with a satisfied smile. After scanning the dungeon's lower floors, Toru found that the remaining monsters had quickly feasted on the fallen ants. The cleanup was swift, leaving no signs of resistance. However, as they prepared to leave, a chilling voice echoed through the cavern, the queen ant's decapitated head still able to speak, hissing warnings of dire consequences, her severed form radiating a sinister aura. Toru, exhausted and uninterested, simply sighed and motioned for Kaede to store the head. Back at the castle, Jonathan Rockbell received the queen's head as proof of their success, commending Toru for saving the capital. Toru, ever humble, downplayed the effort, casually remarking that the ants seemed fewer than expected. Jonathan explained that many soldiers had already died in previous attempts to weaken the colony. As several soldiers entered and bowed, expressing their gratitude, Toru awkwardly rubbed the back of his neck, unsure how to respond to their praise. Toru and Kaede were summoned to King Armin's court, where they stood before the king in formal attire as he addressed the crowd. He praised their efforts in defeating the deadly ant threat, gifting them 300 million in gold as thanks. The crowd cheered loudly, but Toru was stunned when the king declared that the Monument Brigade, his party, would be granted hero status, an honor typically reserved for individuals. Though hesitant, Toru accepted the recognition under the king's watchful eye, and the crowd erupted in applause. King Armin's declaration echoed through the hall as Toru and Kaede exchanged a stunned look. Elsewhere in the city, Sain's arrogance begins to backfire, alienating those around him. His allies pull away as his actions catch up with him. However, his luck seems to change when he discovers an unexplored dungeon near the capital, promising fame and rare loot. Driven by his narcissism, Sain cares little for his team or the treasure, he only craves the glory. Confident that the dungeon will be an easy feat, he leads his team through a foreboding forest, dismissing other adventurers as no threat. But inside the dungeon, they're ambushed by high-level orcs. Sora faints from the pressure, but Sain, undeterred, charges recklessly at the orcs, only to be brutally sent crashing into the wall by a single blow. Desperation grips Sain's group as their magic proves useless against the orcs. Sain's powerful lightning spells are shrugged off with mocking roars, and Lisa's earth wall is easily destroyed. With no options left, Sain's cowardice takes over. Without a word to his comrades, he abandons them, fleeing to safety. The battered team retreats to the dungeon entrance, where Sain is pacing angrily. In a fit of rage, he strikes Lisa, blaming the team for their failure. Onlookers outside the dungeon watch in disbelief. Sain, unaware of the damage to his reputation, rants bitterly, his meltdown contrasting sharply with his earlier confidence. As he forces himself to calm down, his thoughts turn to Toru's calm leadership. His reflection is interrupted by a group of adventurers boasting about their success in clearing the dungeon's first floor. Lisa suggests they ask the nearby adventurers for advice, hoping their tips could help. But Sain, too proud to seek help, dismisses the idea. Instead, he decides to follow the adventurers and ambush them, planning to steal their loot. However, his plan quickly unravels when he stumbles upon the male adventurers in a compromising situation, leading to an embarrassing accident that leaves him covered in mess. Back at camp, the female adventurers catch wind of the smell and, horrified, discover Sain's disgraceful return. They flee, shouting at him to wash up before coming near them. Fuming with humiliation, Sain stomps off to clean himself, his mood darker than ever. Toru enjoys the finer things in life at a lavish event hosted by the capital's second most influential marquis. Dressed in a tailored tuxedo, he sits beside Kaede, who captivates the room with her beauty. As they sip champagne, Kaede explains the event's significance. Their quiet moment is interrupted when Kiwi, Toru's mischievous companion, appears and causes a stir, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Kaede, still fascinated by the luxury, asks how they secured invitations. Toru recalls a recent conversation with Count Rowan, who had urged him to accept the hero's title in gratitude for saving his daughter's life. The mention of Rowan's daughter piques Toru's curiosity, and he asks about her. The Count explains she's busy training to become a proper wife and mentions, almost offhandedly, that even someone with the title of hero can now marry into noble blood. Toru doesn't fully grasp the implication, and the conversation moves on. Rowan then invites Toru to a high-profile auction event, which leads to their current position at an opulent venue. As the auction begins, Toru watches with interest as priceless items are presented. Among them, a weathered ancient scroll catches his eye, a relic from a lost species. While the other bidders are unaware of its value, Toru snags it with a single bid of 1 million, a small sum considering its historical worth. As the bidding escalates, Toru stays focused despite the extravagant items being sold. When a caged fairy is revealed, the crowd gasps, but Toru's attention sharpens. He hears her faint cries for help, and realizing it's her desperate plea, he jumps into the bidding war to free her. Two wealthy men compete fiercely, but Toru, undeterred by their offers, matches them with the rewards from his past missions. One man eventually gives up, but the second, with malice in his eyes, remains determined. Toru, sensing the man's sinister intent, pushes forward, bidding 1 billion to secure her freedom. As the auction concludes, Toru introduces one final item, a vial of healing elixir, which sells for a staggering sum. In the back room, he receives the proceeds in the caged fairy, heading home with a sense of relief and resolve. At home, he carefully places her on a cushion, but her distrustful attitude frustrates him. Toru, undeterred, offers her a cookie. She hesitates, but when she accepts, her mood softens. Toru explains that he heard her cries for help, and the fairy, now calmer, reveals that he is of Dragonman descent. She tells him his ancestors were powerful beings whose lost relics and knowledge may now be his to uncover. Faru explains that her family exists to serve the Dragonmen, and though Toru is uncomfortable with titles, she insists on calling him Master, to avoid disownment. Toru hesitates, but Faru assures him of her loyalty and warrior skills. The next morning, Toru finds Faru asleep beside him and gently carries her downstairs to join Kaede for breakfast. They discuss their plans, deciding to explore hidden areas in the city. Faru, now awake, suggests a visit to her fairy village, famous for its beauty and ruins, but warns of the wary fairy folk. As they head to the guild for quests, their arrival causes a stir. Recognized as members of the Monument Brigade, they're swarmed by fans and promoted to S-rank status by the guild leader. Toru, uncomfortable with the attention, asks Kaede to create a distraction with a blinding light, allowing them to slip away unnoticed. Deciding to relax at home, Toru, Kaede, and Faru return to their dwelling. Toru eagerly begins practicing magic, showcasing water spells, which leave Kaede in awe. He then attempts earth and wind magic, summoning a dust storm that quickly spirals out of control. Concerned, Kaede points out the instability, particularly with the wind magic. Toru defensively claims his magic is perfect. A notification interrupts. The level 3 dungeon has leveled up to level 5. Kaede explains that such dungeons grow in difficulty, housing rare items, which excites Toru. He worries the increase is due to adventurers perishing there, but the prospect of a nearby dungeon excites him, considering it an opportunity for adventure, especially since he owns it. Toru decides they should check out the upgraded dungeon, especially since it's easy to transport there. They find themselves in an unusual space, one floor below the main center stone. Toru quickly suggests using it as storage, and Kaede, ever helpful, begins spreading out his clothes on the floor. Though puzzled, Toru decides not to question it, focusing instead on building a wall for Kaede's privacy. Chaos erupts when Panda and Frau start bickering, with Panda getting overly territorial and attempting to squish Kaede under his massive eyeball. Toru watches amused as Panda easily outmaneuvers Frau, and the sight of them running from each other makes him laugh. The next morning, Toru enjoys a peaceful cup of coffee, but Kaede reminds him they need to plan for the day. Her main concern is her lack of clothes for chores, and though she considers doing Frau's laundry, she has nothing to wear. Toru suggests shopping, which Kaede eagerly agrees to. Both realize it's been a while since they've bought new clothes, and Toru, running low on his own wardrobe, agrees it's time to head out. Kaede, still not admitting to borrowing Toru's clothes, eagerly agrees to the shopping trip. Once in town, they realize Frau's tiny size could be perfect for a doll store. It's an unusual idea, but it might work. Inside, Frau immediately starts trying on doll outfits, putting on a full display. Watching her, Toru is reminded of his childhood, of Nei Sora, and even Lisa, who once had an expensive doll she discarded, just as she had discarded him. The memory stings, but he's snapped from his thoughts when the store owner offers a fairy costume, made by his late wife. He gives it to them for free in her memory, which they gratefully accept. As Frau enjoys her runway show, Toru inspects the dolls more closely, and the group buys everything that catches their eye. They leave, leaving the shopkeeper in disbelief, staring at the cash Toru handed him. A smile spreads across his face. He certainly didn't expect such a windfall. At the house, a playful dynamic unfolds. Kaede storms into Toru's room, insisting he hand over his shirt for laundry. Toru quickly catches on to her plan and tries to sidetrack her by suggesting she focus on the food-stained sheets instead. However, Kaede counters that his shirt is just as dirty, leaving Toru no choice but to give in and take it off. Concern is her lack of Later, during breakfast, Toru notices a change. Today's bread and coffee aren't the usual fare. Curious, he learns from Kaede that she's experimenting with items from a new bakery recommended by a neighbor. Kaede expresses contentment with their life in the capital, appreciating the cozy domesticity. While Toru agrees, he feels uneasy about staying too long, although he has no immediate reason to leave. Meanwhile, Kaede eagerly plans another shopping trip to restock their dwindling food supply, as Frau's appetite proves quite the challenge. Toru reluctantly agrees to the grocery trip, but plans are disrupted when Panda and Frau's playful antics result in a broken window. Frustrated, Toru rushes to check the damage, only to find the culprits have already fled, leaving him to clean up. He realizes he's growing accustomed to their mischief. It's practically become a routine. Later, while exploring the town, Toru overhears locals discussing an unusual problem. Sandworms have been appearing in the fields around Armand, driven to the surface by natural disasters like tornadoes, heavy rains, and earthquakes. The description strikes a chord with Toru, as he recognizes these events are linked to his magic. Although troubled by the unintended consequences, he notes that the guild still calls for sandworm hunts. Toru decides to stay silent, pretending he hasn't heard the conversation, and moves on with his group. While Kaede enjoys browsing fresh vegetables, particularly admiring the tomatoes, she overhears Toru mention restocking canned food. This hints at their adventure resuming, leaving Kaede feeling bittersweet. She's grown attached to their settled life in the capital. Toru shares her feelings but knows he can't remain idle. His unresolved past pushes him to keep moving, as staying too comfortable risks leaving his journey unfinished. Despite his reluctance, he understands the need to press on. After finishing their shopping, the group prepares to leave the market. Just then, Toru notices a distressed woman searching for her young daughter, Kyumin. Always ready to help, Toru steps in, asking Kaede to assist with her sharp sense of smell. Using Kyumin's handkerchief for reference, Kaede quickly picks up the girl's scent, determining she's still nearby, somewhere in the market area. The group quickly follows Kaede's lead as she tracks Kyumin's scent, rushing through the streets until they find the young girl sitting alone in a dark alley, looking lost and frightened. The reunion between Kyumin and her mother is heartwarming, but their relief is short-lived. Suddenly, the ground shakes violently as massive sandworms burst from the earth, sending debris flying. Toru reacts instinctively, knowing they need to evacuate Kyumin and her mother first. He asks Kaede to distract the sandworm while he escorts the pair to safety. Though he feels guilty about his magic's role in this, he pushes those thoughts aside. There's no time to waste. Kaede skillfully keeps the sandworm occupied, using her agility to stay one step ahead. Once Toru ensures Kyumin and her mother are safe, he returns to the scene and is shocked to see the worm rapidly regenerating its wounds. His attention then shifts to Kaede, who's standing nearby, looking embarrassed as the worm's acidic attacks have melted her clothes. Toru quickly looks away, respecting her need for privacy as she covers herself up. Kaede, though embarrassed, tells Toru that her magic won't be effective against the creature. It's clear that the situation is dire, and Toru must rely on his magic to resolve it. A wave of fear grips him. One wrong move could destroy the entire city. But he pushes the fear aside, focusing his energy. Drawing on the elements of wind, earth, water, and fire, he channels them with precision and power. With a final, explosive burst, he defeats the sandworm. As the dust clears, the city erupts in applause. Toru stands breathless and with his heart racing, as the people cheer for his bravery. Despite the recognition, it's a bittersweet moment. He knows the danger isn't over, and many challenges still lie ahead. Leaving the capital behind, Toru and his friends begin their journey toward the fairy village. Despite the obstacles they've faced, there's a renewed sense of excitement. They're ready for the unknown challenges of this next leg of their adventure. Toru and his group make a brief stop at the border town of Grigot, enjoying a restful night in their beds. As Toru stretches, he realizes Frau has been looking for him, suggesting she might expect something from him. She seems eager to head to the fairy village. However, before they can set off, Kaede notices something important. Toru's armor is falling apart. She suggests he buy new armor and knows just the place to find high-quality gear. She leads him to the Temple of the Sacred Weapon, a place that lives up to its legendary reputation. Toru grins as they approach, impressed by its grandeur. Kaede explains that the sacred weapon is a sword that can transform into different forms. As long as the wielder has a clear image of the weapon they want, the sword can take shape and perform in ways no other weapon can. It's said to be nearly indestructible and can even temporarily boost its wielder's level and status. Despite the sword's allure, Toru remains skeptical. He already has a sacred weapon, and the idea of obtaining another seems nearly impossible. However, Kaede's unwavering faith in him boosts his confidence, and for a moment, he feels ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. As Toru and Kaede approach the temple, they notice footprints on the ground, suggesting that 3 or 4 people have already been there, possibly even taking the sacred weapon. Undeterred, they press on, relieved to find the weapon still in place. However, as Toru steps closer to it, doubts flood his mind, and he wonders if he's truly worthy of wielding such a powerful artifact. Meanwhile, A few days earlier in the capital, Sain enters a local bar, searching for work. He approaches the bartender, asking about good-paying jobs, all while scanning the room for something, or someone, that could help him achieve his goals. Convinced that his reputation as a hero precedes him, Sain is taken aback when the people at the bar barely acknowledge him. His frustration grows as they dismiss him, telling him he'll need to earn recognition, just like Toru's party did. Enraged, Sain punches a bystander, triggering a violent brawl in the bar. The citizens of the capital, fed up with Sain's behavior, decide they've had enough. They throw him out, calling him a fake hero who harms innocent people without remorse. His party members manage to calm him down, allowing him to regain his composure and ask about Toru's group. The bartender, still irritated by the brawl, explains that Toru's party, the Monument Brigade, has earned a reputation for slaying some of the country's deadliest beasts. Among their most notable feats is the defeat of the Queen of the Death Ants, a monster no one had been able to conquer for years. Sain's jealousy flares at this, and he screams in disbelief, convinced that if he'd been in the capital, he would have easily outshone this low-ranked party. Eager to learn more, Sain presses the bartender for further details. He soon finds out that the Monument Brigade has traveled to Grigot. A wicked smile spreads across his face as he processes this information. He orders his team to prepare for the trip, determined to confront Toru and his party. Sain and his group arrive in Grigot, tracking down the Monument Brigade's location. Sain sees this as the perfect chance to gain valuable stalker credentials for recognition, but his main goal is to claim the sacred sword and destroy Toru's group. Determined to acquire the weapon, Sain leads his party to the temple of the sacred weapon, convinced that it's finally his time to shine after enduring so many hardships. What he doesn't realize is that Toru, his old friend, is the leader of the Monument Brigade, and he's about to face the very party he's been eager to outshine. Sain tries to lift the sacred sword, putting all his strength into it, but the sword resists him, as if it has a mind of its own. Frustration mounts as he fails to pull the blade from the ground. His anger boils over, and he growls in frustration, unable to accept that the sword won't yield to his will, deepening his obsession. The next day, as Sain and his party nurse their wounds from their failed attempt, Toru successfully claims the sacred sword. To his surprise, the sword transforms into an entire suit of armor. The armor is incredibly light and flexible, moving with the ease of a feather. It's perfectly suited for Toru's fighting style, giving him a significant edge in battle. Feeling more confident, Toru continues the journey toward the fairy village.